Well, hello Pythonistas on YouTube. Welcome to another series on Python and data analysis. And this time we're going to create a tutorial regarding web scraping with Python, because part of data analysis and data mining, you're going to come across web scraping. And this is just an intro and a disclaimer before we start with the tutorial. So it's important that you go through this video. And so let's get into it. And to those who have not developed the skill, computer programming can seem like a kind of magic for some of you. If programming is magic, then web scraping is wizardry. That is the application of magic for particularly impressive and useful, yet surprisingly effortless feats. So over the years, I found that very few programming practices capture the excitement of both programmers and laymen alike, quite like web scraping. The ability to write a simple bot that collects data and streams it down a terminal or stores it in a database, while not difficult, never fails to provide a certain thrill and sense of possibility, no matter how many times you might have done it before. So it's unfortunate when I speak to other programmers about web scraping, there's a lot of misunderstanding and confusion about the practice. And some people aren't just sure if it's legal, and mostly it is legal, or how to handle the modern web with all its JavaScript, multimedia, and cookies. And some get confused about the distinction between APIs and web scrapers. So also what I'm going to base this tutorial on is on the book Web Scraping with Python. You can see the image on the right, and you have the link here. This is an affiliate link, so it means if you click on this link and you go to Amazon and buy the book, I'll get a commission from it. So in that way you can support me, and you can also find the link in the description. And why I have chosen this book is that this book seeks to put an end to many of the common questions and misconceptions about web scraping, while providing a comprehensive guide to most common web scraping tasks. So we are going to go through this tutorial, and we'll provide some code samples periodically to demonstrate concepts. And all the code examples from this tutorials are available on this book. So before we start our disclaimer, I just want to go over what is web scraping and why web scraping. So what is web scraping? It's the automated gathering of data from the internet is nearly as old as the internet itself, although web scraping is not a new term. In years past, the practices has been more commonly known as screen scraping, data mining, or web harvesting, or similar variations. General consensus today seems to favor web scraping, so that is the term I will use throughout this tutorial, and I will occasionally refer to web scraping programs themselves as bots. So in theory, web scraping is the practice of gathering data through any means other than a programmer interacting with an API, or obviously through a human using a web browser. This is most commonly accomplished by writing an automated program that queries a web server, requests data, usually in the form of the HTML and other files that comprise web pages, and then parses that data to extract needed information. So in practice, web scraping encompasses a wide variety of programming techniques and technologies, such as data analysis and information security. So why web scraping? So if the only way to access the internet is through a browser, you're missing out on a huge range of possibilities. Although browsers are handy for executing JavaScript, displaying images, and arranging objects in a more human readable format, among other things. Web scrapers are excellent at gathering and processing large amounts of data. Rather than viewing one page at a time through the narrow window of a monitor, you can view databases spanning thousands or even millions of pages at once. In addition, web scrapers can go places that traditional search engines cannot. A Google search for cheapest flights to Boston, for example, will result in a slew of advertisements and popular flight search sites. Google only knows what these websites say on their content pages, not the exact results of various queries and queries entered into a flight search application. However, a well-developed web scraper bot can chart the cost of a flight to Boston over time across a variety of websites and tell you the best time to buy your ticket. So you might be asking, isn't gathering data what APIs are for? So we'll go over APIs a little bit later in the tutorial. So APIs can be fantastic if you find one that suits your purposes. They can provide a convenient stream of well-formatted data from one server to another. You can find an API for many different types of data you might want to use, such as Twitter posts or Wikipedia pages. In general, it is preferable to use an API if one exists, rather than build a bot to get the same data. However, there are several reasons why an API might not exist. For example, you are gathering data across a collection of sites that do not have cohesive API. The data you want is a fairly small, finite set that the webmaster did not think warranted an API. The source does not have the infrastructure or technical ability to create an API. So even when an API does exist, the request volume and rate limits the types of data or format of data that is provides might be insufficient for your purposes. There is where web scraping steps in. With few exceptions, you can view it in your browser and you can access it via a Python script. If you can access it in a script, you can store it in a database. And if you can store it in a database, you can do virtually anything with that data. There are obviously many extremely practical applications of having access to nearly unlimited data. Marketing, forecasting, machine language translation, and even medical diagnostics have benefited tremendously from the ability to retrieve data and analyze data from news sites, translated texts, and health forums, respectively. So, regardless of your field, there are almost always a way web scraping can guide business practices more effectively, improve productivity, or even branch off into a brand new field entirely. So this tutorial is designed to serve not only as an introduction to web scraping, but as a comprehensive guide to scraping almost every type of data from the modern web. So although it uses the Python programming language and covers many Python basics, it should not be used as an introduction to the language. So I highly suggest you look at an introductory course to Python if you have never done any Python before. You can check out tutorials on my page. There are crash courses and introductory project-based introductory tutorials. So if you're not an expert programmer and don't know any Python at all, so this tutorial might be a bit of challenge. If, however, you have some experience with Python or you are an experienced programmer, you should find the material easy to pick up. So we'll be using Python 3, and I'll be using Visual Studio Code as my IDE because of the debugger options there. I really like that IDE. And also another disclaimer that I want to strictly and necessarily mention is that whatever you do throughout this tutorial and whatever you learn, if you use that code and the techniques to do some something that you're not supposed to do on any website, or you don't have any permission to do it on that website, then I'm not responsible and I'm not liable to any of that stuff that you want to do that is not advised from this tutorial. So this is just a tutorial for learning. This is a learning resource, so don't use any of the knowledge that you obtain to do some harmful stuff to any businesses or any web pages. So obtain necessary permissions. That's your responsibility, and I cannot be held responsible for creating any damages toward a website that you want to scrape and you haven't done your work up front by checking the permissions or whatever you need to check, and I'll get back to it in a second. So we'll go over the legalities and ethics of web scraping. So, and again, before you listen to this, consider the obvious. I'm a developer, I'm not a lawyer, so do not interpret anything you hear here or any other video as a professional legal advice or act on it accordingly. So although I'm sure that I'm able to discuss the legality and ethics of web scraping with a certain knowledge, so you should consult a lawyer, not a software engineer or developer, before undertaking any legally ambiguous web scraping projects. So when it comes to laws, we'll look at US laws and some international ones that are relevant to web scraping and learn how to analyze the legality and ethics of a given web scraping situation. So trademarks, copyrights and patents. So let's go over some intellectual property 101. So there are three basic types of IP, intellectual property. Trademarks, indicated by a TM or an with a circle with a C in it, or a circle with a TM symbol in it. And the copyright, this is the ubiquitous circle with a C in it. And patents, sometimes indicated by text describing that the invention is patent protected, but often by nothing at all. Patents are used to declare ownership over inventions only. You cannot patent images, text, or any information itself, although some patents, such as software patents, are less tangible than what we think of as inventions. Keep in mind that it is the thing or technique that is patented, not the information contained in the patent. And unless you are either building things from scraped blueprints or someone patents a method of web scraping, you are unlikely to inadvertently infringe on a patent by scraping the web. Trademarks are also unlikely to be an issue, but still something that must be considered. According to the US Patent and Trademark Office, it says a trademark is a word, phrase, symbol, or design that identifies and distinguishes the source of the goods of one party from those of others. A service mark is a word, phrase, symbol, or design that identifies and distinguishes the source of a service rather than goods. The term trademark is often used to refer to both trademarks and service marks. So in addition to the traditional words, symbols, branding that we think of when we think of trademarks, other descriptive attributes can be trademarked. This includes, for example, the shape of a container, think like Coca-Cola bottles, or even a color, most notably the pink color of Owen's Corning Pink Panther fiberglass insulation. Unlike with patents, the ownership of a trademark depends heavily on the context in which it is used. For example, if I wish to publish a blog post with an accompanying picture of Coca-Cola logo, I could do that as long as I wasn't implying that my blog post was sponsored by or published by Coca-Cola. If I wanted to manufacture a new soft drink with the same Coca-Cola logo displayed on the packaging, that would clearly be a trademark infringement. Similarly, although I could package my new soft drink in Pink Panther pink, I could not use the same color to create a home insulation product. And one note about copyright law. Both trademarks and patents have something in common in that they have to be formally registered in order to be recognized. Contrary to popular belief, this is not true with copyrighted material. What makes images, texts, music, etc. copyrighted is not the all right reserved warning at the bottom of the page, nor anything special about published versus unpublished material. Every piece of material you create is automatically subject to copyright law as soon as you bring it into existence. And obviously, copyright is a concern for web scrapers. If I scrape content from someone's blog and publish it on my own blog, I could very well be opening myself to a lawsuit. Fortunately, there are several layers of protection that I have that might make my blog scraping project defensible depending on how it functions. First, copyright protection extends to creative works only. It does not cover statistics or facts. Fortunately, much of what web scrapers are after are facts and statistics. Although a web scraper that gathers poetry from around the web and displays that poetry on your own website might be violating copyright law, a web scraper that gathers information on the frequency of poetry posting over time is not. The poetry in its raw form is a creative work. The average word count of poems published on a website by month is not a creative work. Even content that is posted verbatim as opposed to aggregated calculated content from raw scraped data might not be violating copyright law if that data is prices, names of company executives, or some other factual piece of information. So even copyrighted content can be used directly with reason under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, which is short for DMCA. The DMCA outlines some rules for the automated handling of copyrighted material. The DMCA is long with many specific rules governing everything from ebooks to telephones. However, there are two main points that may be of a particular relevance to web scraping. Under the safe harbor protection, if you scrape material from a source that you are led to believe contains only copyright-free material, but some user has submitted copyright material to, you are protected as long as you remove the copyrighted material when notified. You cannot circumvent security measures such as password protection in order to gather content. In addition, the DMC also acknowledges that fair use under the United States Code applies, and that takedown notices may not be issued according to the safe harbor protection if the use of the copyrighted material falls under fair use. In short, you should never directly publish copyrighted material without permission from the original author or copyright holder. If you are storing copyrighted material that you have free access to in your own non-public database for the purpose of analysis, that is fine. If you are publishing that database to your website for viewing or download, that is not fine. If you are analyzing that database and publishing statistics about word counts, a list of authors by prolificity, or some other meta-analysis of the data, that is fine. If you are accompanying that meta-analysis with a few select quotes or brief samples of data to make your point, that is likely to also fine. But you might want to examine the fair use clause in US code to make sure. And then you have something called trespass to chattels. Trespass to chattels is fundamentally different from what we think of as trespassing laws, in that it applies not to real estate or land, but to movable property such as a server. It applies when your access to property is interfered with in some way that does not allow you to access or use it. And in this era of cloud computing, it's tempting to not think of web servers as real, tangible resources. However, not only do servers consist of expensive components, but they need to be stored, monitored, cooled, and supplied with vast amounts of electricity. By some estimates, 10% of global electricity usage is consumed by computers. So if a survey of your own electronics doesn't convince you, consider Google's vast server farms, all of which need to be connected to large power stations. Although servers are expensive resources, they are interesting from a legal perspective in that webmasters generally want to consume their resources. An example, access their websites. They just don't want them to consume their resources too much. Checking out a website via your browser is fine. Launching a full-scale DDoS, which is also pronounced, against it is obviously not. There are 3 criteria that need to be met for a web scraper to violate trespass to chattels. That is lack of consent. Because web servers are open to everyone, they are generally giving consent to web scrapers as well. However, many websites' terms of service agreements specifically prohibit the use of scrapers. In addition, any cease and desist notification obviously revoke this consent. And another violation is actual harm. Servers are costly. In addition to server costs, if your scraper takes a website down or limits its ability to serve other users, this can add to the harm you cause. And the third criteria is intentionality. If you're writing the code, you know what it does. So you must meet all of these 3 criteria for trespass to chattels to apply. However, if you are violating a terms of service agreement but not causing actual harm, don't think that you're immune from legal action. Excuse me. You might very well be violating copyright law, the DMCA, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, or one of the other myriads of laws that apply to web scrapers. And we also need to mention the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. So in the early 1980s, computers started moving out of academia and into the business world. For the first time, viruses and worms were seen as more than an inconvenience or even a fun hobby, and as a serious criminal matter that could cause actual harm like monetary damages. So in response, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act was created in 1986. Although you might think that the act only applies to some stereotypical versions of a malicious hacker unleashing viruses, the act has strong implications of web scrapers as well. Imagine a web scraper that scans the web looking for login forms that with easy to guess passwords or collects government secrets accidentally left in a hidden but public location. All of these activities are illegal, and rightly so, under the CFAA. The Act defines 7 main criminal offenses, which can be summarized as following: the knowing unauthorized access of computers owned by the US government and obtaining information from those computers; the knowing unauthorized access of a computer, obtaining financial information; the knowing unauthorized access of a computer owned by the US government, affecting the use of that computer by the government; knowingly accessing any protected computer with the attempt to defraud; knowingly accessing a computer without authorization and causing damage to that computer; shares of traffic passwords or authorization information for computers used by the US government or computers that affect interstate or foreign commerce; attempts to extort money or anything of value by causing damage or threatening to cause damage to any protected computer; So in short, stay away from protected computers. Do not access computers, including web servers that you are not given access to, and especially stay away from government or financial computers. And last, we're going to talk about robots.txt and terms of service. So a website's term of service and robots.txt files are in interesting territory, legally speaking. If a website is publicly accessible, the webmaster's right to declare what software can and cannot access it is debatable. Saying it is fine if you use your browser to view this, but not if you use a program you wrote to view it is tricky. Most sites have a link to their terms of service in the footer on every page. The terms of service contains more than just the rules for web crawlers and automated access. It often has information about what kind of information the website collects, what it does with it, and usually a legal disclaimer that the services provided by the website come without any express or implied warranty. So if you are interested in search engine optimization or search engine technology, you have probably heard of robots.txt file. If you go to just about any large website and look for its robots.txt file, you will find it in the root web folder. So guys, always check out the robots.txt and terms of service when you want to scrape a website or build a code or build your bot. So this is the end of this intro video. I know it's a very long video, but it's very, very important that you actually know this stuff before you start to write the code and test your code against any website. So I hope you have gotten some insight from this tutorial, and I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you and bye for now.